Greetings, dear listeners, and welcome to the newest episode of Fans About Films. Speaking to you, as usual, is creator and host Lasse Vogt, who has a very special guest today. You know this gentleman from his works on several movies you might have seen, including Monster House, Trick or Treat, and especially Krampus. I am very happy and incredibly honored to have him on this show, Mr. Douglas Pipes.
Hello, Germany and the podcast world. How you doing, Lasse?
I'm doing amazingly. How about you?
I'm well. You might need to give me a very slow pronunciation of your name so I get it right from here on out, because I know I just mangled it.
No problem. Lasse Vogt.
Lasse.
Yes, it's a Swedish name.
I have very dear friends that are Swedish. My dearest friend, his wife is Swedish, and so my sort of half-nephews are both half Swedish.
Oh, amazing. Maybe you should tell the listeners what exactly you are doing.
Yeah, so I just finished a movie called The Babysitter on Netflix, which is a really fun, entertaining, wild comedy horror movie that I recommend fans of comedies and horror movies checking it out on Netflix. Great,
we will talk about that one a little later, I think. So, I discovered you and your work through the 2015 Christmas horror comedy movie Krampus, which I enjoyed immensely, and I also really dug the score, and so I found you and your work. I actually reviewed it on my score blog, and you retweeted the review, as I recall. And that was a great honor for me, actually.
Well, it's an honor to have people take the time to listen to film scores and to talk about them and to promote them to the film score community. It's something that I'm very grateful for the friends out there that do take such an interest. So thank you for the review.
and thank you for retweeting it. That's always great. I actually had that a few times right now, so it's going good, I guess. Maybe we can start our little interview here with how did your career actually start?
So when I graduated from high school, I took all my money and bought a synthesizer, joined a band, and while I was in that band, I was approached to do a film score for an independent film, and I really enjoyed it, and I did a couple of those, and I wasn't crazy about my composing technique, so I went to university to study composition and orchestration, not film scoring, but actual orchestral composition and orchestration. And from there, I started taking student films to get back into film scoring, and I did some studies at UCLA film scoring, and overseas I studied in London and Paris for a year. And when I came back, one of the people that I had done his film scores, Gil Kennan, he graduated and got an agency out in Hollywood and landed a big film called Monster House, and he did an incredible thing, which was to bring me on as his composer on his first film, which became my first film. And from there, things just evolved. It was an incredible experience.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think a lot of people discovered you and your work through that movie. I watched that movie just a few years later for the first time, and I enjoyed it a lot. It's a very good movie, and it's a very good score.
Yeah, I was so fortunate to get a chance to work with such a large orchestra and such a great team on such a wonderful movie. You couldn't ask for more to start a career on such a fantastic project.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's one of my big dreams as well, because I myself am studied a filmmaker, director and writer, and I hope one day I can work on a bigger movie with a composer who has the chance to work with a big orchestra, because a film score is my world. It's just, I love film music. I loved it as long as I can remember, actually.
That's great. That is so great. Well, I hope everything works out, and keep working and keep trying. Perseverance is a big part of it.
Yeah, totally. I'm very, very proud of my newest short film, which was actually the end of my film study. And I had the chance to work with a musician from Berlin. We never met personally. We just pretty much discovered each other through the internet. And so I gave him the job to score my short film, and that was just all done online, and he did it all by himself. And it was actually for a 30-minute short, it was actually a pretty long and kind of complex score. And I was so proud when he sent me the tracks. I listened to them and I started crying.
Oh, that's fantastic. That is fantastic. Well, congratulations. I hope to see it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's currently available on YouTube. I'm thinking about putting it on with English subtitles. It's a sweet little movie about a film critic, actually. And I was very, very keen on the music. I told my composer what the mood in certain scenes should be like. And yeah, and he adapted it very, very well. And I was very proud that he wrote such a large score, because a lot of student filmmakers don't take that much care of it, but I'm a guy who goes nuts over details, and that's pretty much my thing. And a few years ago I started reviewing film scores on a professional level, as professional as I can do, and it works out very well. Just today I finished my For Ragnarok review, which went online. And the next one is going to be the Justice League score, which I'm looking forward to listening very closely.
Great. Yeah, getting back to your relationship with the composer on student films, I actually go in to teach or give lectures on some film making classes. I've done this a few times, and it's always interesting that the filmmakers in film school, they have so much going on that some of them don't think about music until the very end, but they forget that the composer is also oftentimes in these situations, might be a music student at the university or something, but they need time too, and they're in finals and all this stuff. So if you're a filmmaker, you should start thinking about music at the very beginning. Even if you don't have something to show the composer, you can certainly start figuring out who your composer is going to be and start talking about things. And the more time you give your composer to get in the world of what you want, the better your results will be.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because I actually have a certain type of music in my head while I'm writing my scripts. So I start with music pretty much from the very beginning. So that of course helps. And while I'm shooting the scenes, I already have in mind how the music is going to be, or if there isn't supposed to be any music at all. So that certainly helps when I am working with my current composer, Oliver Seidel, who did an amazing job scoring 2 of my films. So yeah, I can tell him here's going to be music and this has no music. So yeah, that's certainly helpful. But you nailed it right there.
Yeah.
So your newest movie, it will be on Netflix, and it's called The Babysitter. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah, it came about a little bit before last summer. It was I was shown the movie. I'll give you the quick answer, but I was put my hat in the ring on it, and then I was shown the movie, and I had watched it without knowing anything about it, and was absolutely floored by it, because it's really fun. It's very entertaining. It's visually there's so much there to grab hold of, and McGee's Styles just has so much electricity. And there are some twists in there that are really, really grab you. So I was very excited to work on it, and worked on it over the summer. And it just came out in October. And I sure hope a lot of people see it, because I think it has a lot to offer people who like to watch horror movies that are fun, wild, entertaining rides.
Yeah, going off from the trailer, it looks very entertaining. I immediately caught onto it, and I tweeted like, "Is there gonna be a score release?" Because I saw that you did the music, and then I think you responded about it that there might be a chance, but it's not very likely. So we will see about that, I guess.
Yeah, there are a lot of songs in the movie. There's a lot of score in the movie, but I also know that it takes a lot to get a score release out in certain situations. So hopefully, if there's enough groundswell and there's an opportunity to do it, I hope we can do it. I will certainly keep pushing for that if we can.
Yeah, I myself can't wait to actually watch the movie. Yeah, from the trailer it looks very, very fun. What exactly was your approach for the score for that one?
It's a coming of age story that has a horror comedy in the middle of it. So the approach was to really get at the relationship between the two main characters in the coming of age story. And then once the horror breaks loose, and it breaks loose pretty kind of hits you right between the eyes, to be very bold and forceful with that. So it's without giving too much away, it goes in a few different directions, and I like the idea of, I certainly like horror movies that aren't just sort of one dynamic tone throughout them. This one, there's a lot of just subtlety and sweet character development, and then there's some very graphic horror and wild comedy. There's a lot to this film, but I sure enjoyed every bit of it.
Oh yeah, that goes right along with your one of your most recent scores, Krampus. That movie isn't also straight up horror. There are very, very sweet and genuinely heartfelt moments in it, and kind of fairy tale like even. And also you have the holiday angle, which helps creating a very wide variety of music.
Yeah, when I will get asked about being a horror composer, and my response is, I don't think I've ever scored a true horror movie. I'm not a horror composer. I'm a composer that's worked on some movies that have lots of horror in them, but they also have lots of every other drama and comedy and fantasy and all sorts of things. And horror oftentimes is, in some of them, is maybe one of the least scored elements in the film.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Sometimes with straight up horror, less music is more.
Yeah, and like I say, Krampus, it's very much a lot of fantasy music and a lot of heartwarming music, and then a lot of horror music. Same with Monster House, is just as much fantasy, action, adventure, and sweet, youthful music as there is scary music. And then in Trick or Treat, there are certainly big parts of horror writing, but there's also a lot of what I would say fantastic and fantasy-based, nostalgic, Halloween evoking music that's meant to be, like you said, fairy tale, but meant to be of that type of storytelling, fairy tale, fantasy nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Which leads us right to your, I think, most recent score, Awaken the Shadow Man, which, from what I could get from the trailer, looks also like it's kind of like a dark and a moody horror film, and the music I listened to matches that one. It certainly sounds like one of your more darker scores. What can you tell us about that one?
Yeah, that is certainly probably the darkest score I've ever written, and it's almost all analog synths and bells and chimes and metallic resonance with some strings. It's funny. I think the movie is not really a horror movie as much as it is just a suspense thriller. It's a much more of a slow burn movie than a fast-paced horror movie or a shocking horror movie, something like that. It's a little more psychological in nature.
All right.
But the score, I'm really proud of the score. It's one of these mad scientist in the lab scores of me just working with all my synthesizers and dialing knobs and making much more. This is the most textural approach to a score that I've ever done. So if you like analog synth scores, La La Land Records released it on CD and on iTunes and such. I would love it if people checked it out, because it's something that I'm really proud of.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, given that Jonathan Broxton pretty much reviewed all of your bigger scores, and he's a big fan of your work, as I recall, I'm sure he will get to it at some point if he keeps an eye open for that.
Yeah, I understand that this was a very, very, very micro budget film. Some friends of mine made, and it was an opportunity for me to, as a composer, to branch out to do something different and in a style that I don't normally get called on to do. So I certainly wanted to do it. And I understand, with John and such, that they tend to review higher profile films.
Mm.
Yeah, I would love it if you did.
Yeah, it would be great. Maybe I can do something more for the popularity and like share the score and everything. And who knows, maybe that will get the attention of some other people.
Yeah, it would be nice for people to see another side of it. It's always, as a composer, it's always nice to show different sides of your scoring technique.
Yeah, certainly. You have done some animated movies. You have also done, of course, live action stuff. Is there a big difference when it comes to approaching those scores, or how exactly is that for you when it comes to your working process?
Well, one thing with animated scores is they tend to have music throughout because the entire world is fabricated. So generally there is more music in an animated film, and also animated films take longer to make, so you do get a little bit more time with them as you work on them. I was fortunate on Monster House to get to work on that throughout the whole process, even in the very earliest days. And what's interesting in the case of some animation films is you work on it well before the animation is complete. And so from a composer standpoint, one of the things that sort of drives your compositional choices is the pacing, obviously, and what's going on action-wise or dialogue-wise or drama-wise, but also just the colors and just the nature of what you're seeing. And in animation, sometimes you don't see the final picture even before you're done. And I know there are scenes where I've worked on an animated film and then I think, oh, wow, that came out a little darker than I was anticipating, or that came out a certain way, or, hey, there's something on the screen I didn't know was going to be there. Yeah, but it's always interesting, and I really enjoy working with animation because it's also one of the ones where it really is very super tied to the picture. Like the synchronization of an animation film tends to be more hyper focused, whereas in a live action film you're just a little bit one step back, and of course you're in sync and things hit on certain things, but also the arcs tend to be a little longer.
Yeah, of course. So, when it comes to approaching, of course, like some of your more darker materials, what exactly inspires you when it comes to scoring horror movies?
My main inspirations musically are come from the classical music world. So I'm a fan of Stravinsky and Bartók and Mahler and Berlioz and Beethoven, all the way up to I'm a modern Arvo Pärt fan, and all different types of orchestral music. And those inform a lot of things. On the film composer side, Bernard Herrmann and Jerry Goldsmith's approach to horror are big influences to me.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think one thing I really appreciate is their approach to dynamics and space. They really know how to carve out storytelling with the music as opposed to creating just big ambiences. They're still telling character stories through the music, and that's something that I really respond to.
Oh yeah, you can certainly hear the Bernard Herrmann influence, especially in Trick or Treat, which is right from the get-go noticeable, and I really liked that kind of scoring.
That is an absolute, flat-out, unashamed homage. There's no two ways about it. The thing with Trick or Treat is Halloween means a little bit different to everybody, and as you go through life, it means something different to you each year. And the same with horror films and such. So that was sort of just a nostalgic nod to Bernard Herrmann and how his influence has been to me throughout the years.
Yeah, coming back to Krampus real quick, was it the original idea to use classic Christmas songs in the score, like wave them in and actually making it part of the main theme for the title character? Was that idea there right from the beginning, or was it something that came like later in the process?
No, that was from the very beginning. That was the idea, to have those themes interwoven. So Krampus has its own sort of original folk-based theme that gets used and varied throughout the movie. But also throughout it, there are fragments and mutations of standard Christmas themes to give a sense, depending on the scene, either a very sort of straightforward, you hear it straight through, or in some cases it's just subtle, almost subliminal idea of the Christmas holidays, either through melodic fragments or instrumentation choices, Christmas jingle bells and other Christmas bells and chimes.
Indeed, and that mixture works very, very well. It's great to listen to that score and like discovering every little reference. I had a lot of fun picking it out and was like, oh, there's that classic song and there's that one, and it's great to hear those spooky and sometimes even terrifying variations.
Yeah, it was great fun to work on, and I suppose it'd be fun if they ever did a Blu-ray release. I know some Blu-ray releases will just have a score-only track. That would be fun to play a holiday drinking game to figure out how many times you can catch the references of the different Christmas themes.
Oh, that would be great. They rarely do that anymore, because I see a lot of very, very old DVDs, especially Danny Elfman scored DVDs, and they more often than not have the soundtrack only option, and I wished they would do this with actually every movie.
Yeah, I don't know all the intricacies of why they don't, if that competes with the other score releases, which you wouldn't want it to somehow cannibalize that. But it would be fun to be able to watch it in sync.
Yeah, that's a good argument. I actually made some experiments with that one, and I copied certain scenes from my DVDs, and then I cut all the sound off, and then I went to my soundtrack albums, picked the right track, and edited it so it mirrored exactly what was heard in the film, and so I could watch certain scenes just with the music, and I just had to edit it myself, and that was a lot of fun, sometimes tricky, but it was great to show it actually to people, to show them, hey, this is how important the music is, but sometimes you can rarely hear it because the sound design is just too loud.
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed this, but there certainly are times, because films are working on so many things simultaneously, that often you will record the music and maybe the scene has even been edited a little bit beyond after you've recorded it. So the things that you might hear on a score CD may not be exactly how they play in a film, because the film has been continued to be edited. So that must be a tricky thing to make it all completely line up.
Yeah, it is tricky, but I was able to do it in a way that was barely noticeable. So I guess that worked out. I did that with movies like How to Train Your Dragon or even Suicide Squad, and some other movies Hans Zimmer did. So that was a lot of fun doing that. And I think I have to do that with Krampus, even though, in my opinion, the music is very noticeable in most scenes. So it would be fun with certain scenes, but for the most part, I think the score is very audible.
Nice.
So when it comes to the releases of your scores, of course you have like the something like iTunes and Spotify, and sometimes even vinyl, which is great, and CD, which is the most common thing. But right now, iTunes and Spotify are the more common things to listen and download music. What's your take on that, and which kind of release do you prefer?
Well, I, of course, like the fact that it's available on iTunes and Spotify so people can get it quickly. But I'm very much a fan of the physical media releases, and the companies that do it. Waxwork Records have released Trick or Treat and Krampus, and there's a lot of work goes into that. They're so great and fantastic, and how much loving care they put into it. And La La Land Records and Perez Sarabande have released my scores on CD, and they too put so much care. These are true fans of film music, and for the film scoring community of fans, which I include myself, the physical releases are far more important than the digital releases, because there's something about listening to music and holding the booklet and holding the gatefold in your hand and reading and looking at maybe who the musicians were that worked on it, or reading the stories from the director or the composer, just finding out it's a much more immersive experience. And I know some of the iTunes ones come with PDFs of all this stuff, but there is something about sitting back in your chair, not looking at a computer screen and having something in your hand. It's even similar to, I have a Kindle and I read books on a Kindle, but there is something about holding the printed book in your hand too that is a immersive experience.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I prefer the physical release way more. Whenever I can, I get the actual CD, which is just a thing. And I have a big collection, and I actually have I think all of your scores that are on CD I actually have. I have Trick or Treat, Monster House, and Krampus. I have all of them on CD, and it's just great to see them lined up. Yeah, I think that's so much better. And when I don't have the other choice, I of course will buy stuff on iTunes. Spotify, I not really, just when because I want to listen to it whenever I can, and I actually want to pay for it. So. That's actually something I prefer. CDs all the way.
Yeah, and I think the pendulum has swung back to where it seemed like for a while people were so worried that all of physical media was just going to go away, and now we're seeing a return, especially a huge return of vinyl. And I would imagine even CDs will start to make a comeback in a few more years, where they become once again things people want to have collections as opposed to just a hard drive.
Yeah, I'm sure. Let's hope that gets even better now from as we speak. what do you think is, in your own humble opinion, your best score?
You're asking a parent who their favorite child is. You can't do that. It's an unfair question.
Yeah, it is.
They all have such special meanings to me. Sorry, they're not all equally as special to me, but certainly the ones where I've got to work with the larger orchestras, Monster House and Trick or Treat and Krampus, are very special and very dear to me. Some of the other ones, this Babysitter score is very dear to me because I got to do something a little more different than I had done in the past. I love the Awaken the Shadow Man score because, again, it's nowhere near the scale of these other ones, and it's much more an ambient sort of. It's not nearly the thematic score that I've ever done, and those are my favorite types of scores. But this was a fun ambient synthesizer score, so it was really fun to make. It was very much a handmade score. And even some of the TV movies that I've done and some of the other projects, they're all dear to me in their special way. But when you get to work with so many musicians on an orchestral score, and the musicians that are so incredibly talented bring all of their years of talent and pour it out into your music, that's an unbelievably profound feeling.
Yeah, I can imagine. That just sounds great. I listened to the Krampus score earlier today, and I'm still amazed by how much depth there is in the orchestra and how much layers it has, and just how funny and creative and also sometimes very threatening it is. It's just a lot of fun. Listen to it. I actually showed one of my brothers the movie last year for the first time, and he had a blast with it. He loved the music, he loved the effects and everything in the movie, and it was great to see it with him, just to see it pretty much new. Whenever you watch a movie with another person you've already seen, it's like you're watching it for the first time in a certain way, because then you see the reaction of the other person who has the same reaction maybe you had when you watched it first.
Yeah, that's always a great experience. And yeah, the Krampus is, the whole goal of that film was for it to be fun and entertaining and thrilling and scary, but all the dynamics of that roller coaster ride.
Yeah. Do you listen in your private time to other contemporary film scores? And if so, which composers do you like the most who are currently working?
I actually don't listen to the degree that I would want to sort of branch out and say who my favorites are. I'm a fan of Alexandre Desplat. His Birth score pretty much throttled me in terms of sort of things that just came out that were so different from everything else. That was a big one for me. I loved that score. He's a wonderful composer, but there are so many talented and wonderful composers. The thing is there are so many truly talented composers that it would just be lovely if they were given enough opportunities so that we did get to hear different types of approaches to movies. The movie-making world isn't a world of experimentation so much. It does sometimes, but it's much more concerned with making sure it gets done and done right and done in a way that's not get anyone in trouble, shall we say.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not to take away all the experimentations that Hans Zimmer's done and many composers but you have to get to his level to be able to experiment. It's hard to be an up and coming experimental composer unless you're working on a film that doesn't have a big budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, my all-time favorites are Jerry Goldsmith and Bernard Herrmann, and of course John Williams, without a doubt. That's that almost goes without saying, but then nothing goes without saying, so I'll say it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, if you actually want to listen to a score that's very experimental, which was for a big budget movie, listen to Daniel Pemberton's King Arthur Legend of a Sword, which is one of the most interesting scores of this year, which is very, very extravagant, very unconventional, and I had a great fun listening to it because it didn't sound like any other type of blockbuster score.
I'll check it out because I do like to hear. There's the twofold process of I go to a lot of I subscribe to the local orchestral concerts here, the LA Phil, the Los Angeles Master Chorale, the Los Angeles Opera, just to get my inspirational fixes. All the time. That's sort of where I go to refresh the well. Always looking for, interesting takes on film music. And they, for the most part, the most interesting composers, I can get a sense of that they're also interested in these types of things too.
Oh, yeah. To close this little interview, let's take a look into the future. What would be like dream projects of yours? What kind of movies or what specific movies would you love to score?
It would be a musical, and which I'm sketching out an idea for my own right now. It's going to take tons of time because I have to kind of stretch it out as I'm working on other things. But also, I would love to do a big sci-fi fantasy, something that has a lot of space and big, grand thematic approaches, much less on the, not necessarily on the action side as much as just a sprawling, epic sci-fi drama would be a dream project for me.
Oh yeah, that would be nice. So, as we come to the end of this little interview, is there maybe something you want to know or some, like, a final thing you want to get out on this podcast?
Well, yes. I would like to ask you what I'm going to play the interviewer for 1 second here. But what was it that got you hooked on film scores? Was it a specific movie, a specific film score, a specific, like, you weren't used to orchestral music and then you heard something and that sort of opened windows to your mind? What made you become such a fan of film music?
Well, that is actually quite easy to answer because my family works with classical music. My mother is a trained musical singer. My father works as an opera singer. So I grew up with that kind of music. But my first hook on a film score was actually the score for Chicken Run, composed by Harry Greggs Williams and John Powell. When I watched that movie, the score just hooked me, and I was like, hey, this is very, very good music, because before that I, of course, watched a lot of the Disney musicals, but that musical approach was always a little different, and I just loved that kind of colorful orchestration those two composers did with Chicken Run, and that one brought me to film music. And shortly after, I watched the first Harry Potter movie, and Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone was the first score CD I got as a present, and from then on out, I started to become a collector.
Great, that's such great news to hear. I'll have to go back and listen to Chicken Run. I don't think I ever heard it outside of the film.
Yeah, you should. It's great. It's a great amount of fun. Possibly the most creative use of kazoos in a film score I've ever heard.
Huh. That's great. I think I may have watched that movie on a plane, which is the terrible, especially when it came out, a terrible way to watch a movie. So I'll have to revisit that.
Yeah, you should. The movie is great and the score is just amazing. As we come to an end now, let me just say I am incredibly thankful that you were able to do this so quickly after I approached you about the idea of being a guest on this podcast. I had a great amount of fun talking to you and getting a little insight on your working process and what you do and what your mindset is when it comes to your project. I also I have to say big greetings from podcaster Ian Crabb. He is one of the hosts of pretty much the best soundtrack podcast that is currently on the internet, Sideshow Sound Theater, and I am actually a co-host on episode 90, so check that one out. Check the whole soundtrack podcast out, Sideshow Sound Theater. They are amazing guys, and I want to say from him, he is a big fan.
Oh, thank you so much. Tell hello to him as well.
I will. So, in conclusion, thank you so much for your time, and let me ask you, where can people find you on the internet?
So I have a website, which is www.douglaspipes.com. I'm on Twitter at DouglasPipes and Instagram at DPipes, and also on Facebook as Douglas Pipes.
Great. And where can people find your work?
So my film scores are available obviously on iTunes and Spotify and such, but also through La La Land Records, Varese Saraband Records, and the vinyl is at Waxwork Records. And I also have done, we didn't speak about this, but I'll give a quick shout out to Waxwork has a subdivision called House of Waxwork, and it's Waxwork Comics. And they release comics with a 7-inch vinyl, and I did a track on Volume 1, which came out a few months ago, and another track on Volume 2, which is coming out very soon. So check out, if you're a comic book fan and vinyl collector, check out Waxwork Comics, and that's coming out soon via Waxwork Comics and Waxwork Records.
Awesome. So people, get on that, buy that. It's worthy, trust me. So, in conclusion, thank you so much for doing this, for being a guest on this newest episode of Fans About Films. I hope you had some fun as well. So, anything else you want to tell the audience before we say goodbye?
I just thank you so much, and thank you for having me on the show, and really appreciate all the people who help support film music. It's really great.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for being just one of many, many great composers and being an inspiration for so many people who love to listen to this kind of stuff. So, dear listeners, that was it. My first professional interview with a real professional composer. I hope I did well. I hope this won't be the last time I can do this. Thank you so much again for being a part of this. This was Fans About Films. You can find me and all my work, of course, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, channel name TheDeppert, or if you just type in Lasse Vogt, you can find all of my short films, all of my comedy bits, all of my film reviews. Most of them are in German, but hey, you know. And my professional score reviews you can find on my blog, scoregeek.wordpress.com. They are, of course, all in German, but you can run a translation program over it. So it's no biggie. It got retweeted already a few times, and I'm very proud of it. Thank you so much for listening. And Mr. Douglas Pipes, thank you again for being a guest on here.
Thank you.
And we say good night.